There is one thing that I see people get wrong in yoga all the time that can either limit their progress or even lead to injury. And of course, that's something we really want to avoid. So what is this mistake? Well, it all comes down to the question, should you round your back? We're going to look at this in two poses, downward facing dog and a forward fold. There are so many benefits of both of these poses, and one of them is the stretching of the hamstrings. So let's have a bite-sized anatomy lesson. Your hamstrings start from your sit bones and end at your knee. In order to stretch our hamstrings, we want to move these 2 points further apart. Okay, so how does rounding the back affect this, I hear you ask? Well, it all comes down to the positioning of the pelvis. Let me explain. Pelvic tilt is the orientation of the pelvis in respect to the thigh bones and the rest of the body. So we generally either have anterior pelvic tilt, where the pelvis tilts towards the front with the sit bones pointing up, or we can have posterior pelvic tilt, where the pelvis tilts down and the sit bones turn down. So if we want to stretch our hamstrings in downward facing dog and in a forward fold, we want to keep the back flat. Why? Because this ensures that the fold is not coming from our lower back, but it's coming from our hips, which can actually lead to a hamstring stretch. And this means that we want an anterior pelvic tilt in these poses. So the most common mistake is rounding the back and missing out on the hamstring stretch. Let's start with downward facing dog. If you have tight hamstrings and you try to bring your heels to the floor in downward facing dog, here's what happens. The back rounds, the pelvis is in posterior tilt, we aren't stretching the hamstrings, maybe the calves, and there's more weight that goes into the arms. So let's see how we can fix this. First, let's bend the knees, and this will help find a neutral spine. Tilt the sit bones up towards the sky, and now we want equal weight between the hands and the feet. And with time, we can try to bring our heels towards the floor. Now, let's have a look at a seated forward fold. If you have tight hamstrings and try to fold forward, here's what happens. The back rounds because that's easier for our body. But if all we're doing is rounding our back, we're not actually rotating our hip bones. And so the pelvis is in posterior tilt. And that means that no matter how far we reach with our chest, the hamstring stretch will remain pretty minimal. Plus, we may injure our lower back by doing this. So let's see how we can fix this. A great modification for anyone with tight hamstrings is to bend the knees. And this can make the hamstring stretch more comfortable, which in turn makes it easier to keep the back flat. Over time, of course, you can work on straightening the legs. Another modification is to sit on a blanket. The spine is nice and long, the chest is open, and there's a slight anterior tilt of the pelvis by folding from the hips. Alternatives include sitting on a block and using a strap. So if you're now wondering how to really stretch out tight hamstrings, you're going to want to watch this video next because this flexibility hack will blow your mind.